Hi, welcome to the Mental Wellness Journey. Honor the Authentic You. We have a treat today. We have Dr. Erika Austin, and she was raised by a go-getter single mom who taught her the value of resiliency. Erika found herself losing her first husband to cancer at age 26 and then getting a divorce at 32. Feeling utterly lost, confused, and like a failure, she managed to turn all this around to create the life of her dreams with her husband and two daughters. Her accomplishments are numerous and include 20 plus years of teaching, mentoring, guiding others in education, business, relationships, writing, and life. Her career went from university professor to middle and high school principal to a writer, editor, and now transformational life coach. She loves coaching and thinks it's the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. Her specialty is supporting women facing loss and grief. So thank you, Erika, so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So tell me how you became a transformational coach that focuses on loss and grief.
Yeah, so you can see a little bit about reading my bio. It was definitely like a bumpy road, and I wouldn't say something that I planned to do per se. Definitely wasn't, my career trajectory or so I thought. So definitely came about through my life experiences. When I was in my Ph.D. program, my first husband was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma. And so that was devastating. And we were young, we were 26 at the time when he got diagnosed. And so, as you can imagine, our whole life just got flipped upside down. We went from, starting off as a newly married couple with all of our dreams, our kids' names picked out, all of that stuff that you do, um, to the very, um, sobering reality that this was happening, and it was stage 4, and it was very serious, and it had metastasized to his liver by the time we found it. So there wasn't a lot of hope beyond clinical trials and things like that, which we tried. So yeah, that was definitely my first entry to really facing death. And like I said, I was in my sociology program at the time, my doctoral program.
So
And yeah, and so we went on that journey. It was 7 months from the day of his diagnosis to the day of his death.
oh wow, that is like a whirlwind.
It was a whirlwind, and literally, we went from our apartment to literally living in the hospital, from one treatment to the next, to very few days at home in between, at which time we then stayed with family because, it was a lot of care, to then facing his death and then everything that came with, the aftermath of that. And so that really took me down the road of grief, and not having experienced it like that with somebody so close and so meaningful. And I was having a hard time figuring out how to get back into life, and
You
and
couldn't, yeah.
yeah, my sense of identity and who I was. And we'd been together a while, and he was a big part of my life, and so it was difficult. And I had a great advisor at the time. I was pretty kind of, nearing the completion of my doctoral program, and she advised that I teach a course around sociology of death and dying.
Wow.
And although at first I was like, no way, I ended up doing it, and it ended up being very cathartic. It really kind of catapulted me in everything that I really wanted to learn about. I'm analytical. That's kind of who I am. And so I wanted to learn more about death. I wanted to understand it from different perspectives. I I think my brain was just trying to make sense of things, and
Sure.
nothing, and everything felt out of control, and nothing made sense. And so I think this gave me a little bit of just trying to find meaning in it all.
Mm-hmm.
And in teaching that course, and it ended up being a pretty large course. There was about over 300 people in the course, and
Wow.
yeah, it was big. And I ended up teaching it a few times and ended up getting awards for it, which was I think just validated, because at first it felt kind of strange. And here I was like blending my personal and professional and being vulnerable, which was scary. Um, and so the fact that it, especially, college students, so the fact that it just opened them up to, the flip side of death is obviously life, and being like, we get this life, like, what do you want to do with it? And are you doing what you want to do, not what your parents told you to do? And are you really
Right.
kind of on that track that's feels right for you, and following your intuition? And so that really, I think, opened up the window to this experience was helping people.
Mm.
And, that started to bring in a little bit of taking it from something very dark to it providing some meaning for myself. And from there, people would just, friends of friends would turn to me if somebody had experienced a loss, or so I was always offering advice or insight where I could. All the while, to be honest, I was kind of going through my own depression and not really realizing it, truthfully. I was just kind of going through the motions of life and had lost that joy. I'd really lost the joy for living, and ended up in a relationship. Eh, the reason being because I was really trying to escape a lot of my feelings and a lot of the sadness, and that was an easy escape for me. And that's what led, as you read in the intro, to a divorce, because my friends and family were really concerned about me. They knew I wasn't really being myself, and knew that this relationship, there wasn't really any love or connection there. It was just me escaping my own reality. And after that, I really started waking up to the possibility that I could live again. I could find joy again. I could find meaning in all of this. And that's what led me to seeking out different ways that I could integrate this into my life. And at the time, I'd been a professor. I'd also then ran a school for a while, and that was great. But I was really connecting to primarily women who had gone through major losses, whether it was death or divorce or major health concern that, forced them to face their own mortality. So I started just experimenting with that, with supporting people through that. And that's kind of where my own transformational coach journey began.
Wow. That is a story.
Yeah.
That's no, that's so heartfelt and something people don't choose, but I don't know how you could. So what do people do what can they do if they're facing a loss?
Yeah, definitely. One is just from a little bit that I shared about my own experience is not run from the pain. That was something I knew way too well, that I did, not consciously, obviously, but when I would try to sit with the reality, it hurt a lot. And I didn't know at the time how to even access those feelings and how to come to terms with them and invite them in and lean towards them instead of away from them, which can be so difficult. And so the more I started learning to do that, to sit with the pain and not be scared of it, and see what it had, to share with me, and any insight that I could get from it, the more healing it was, honestly. And so that's kind of my first bit of advice for people, that yes, it's scary and it can be overwhelming. So I always recommend get support while you're doing this. But be open, or at least curious about the pain, and be willing to make space for it if you can. I think there's so much healing there when, and I know it's scary and brings up a lot for people, but I've realized through my own trying to sidestep it or run away from it, that it doesn't go away. So even if you think it's going to,
Yeah.
it doesn't. It lingers, and still, until you look at it. I think of it as, I have two daughters, which you said, but I think of it as like when they were young and they're like 2 or 3 and they just want your attention, and maybe you can't give it to them right then and there. So you're like, hold on, it doesn't go away. They just keep asking. So I think of pain like that, like it doesn't go away. It's like that toddler that needs your attention and needs you to actually pause and look at them and see what they need. I think of it like that, because once you give, your pain that time and that attention, um, then amazingly enough, like things start to move and shift, and you start making way for little bits of more connection, finding more meaning, finding more joy. Like it doesn't, I won't say it happens all at once, but it happens over
Or
time. And
fast enough, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. The more you kind of stick with it. And there's obviously other processes along the way, but at least that's a first kind of entry into it.
Wow. So, how did you find yourself, or did you know yourself? I can imagine going through what you've gone through. During it, you really lost connection with who you were. And then, how do you connect with your authentic self or honor your authentic self then? How did,
Yes,
yeah.
definitely lost myself along the way. And that took time, it took time, just like I was saying, making time for my, for the loss and the grief. It was also making time for myself, like rediscovering who I was and what I enjoyed before all of this, and what brought me joy. And that came about through starting to build in a better, which I didn't even remember the last time I had it, like a self-care practice and what that looked like. And for me, a lot of shifts started to happen when I would start my day with self-care, meaning, what did I, just by asking the question, like, what did I need today? And every day it was a little bit different, and making space for that, through that, I ended up really finding yoga practice, meditation practice, things that really served me and just made me feel better. And it was kind of like, it almost became fun, like this process of, what brings me joy, what lights me up, what am I enjoying, and slowly allowing time and space for that. I think sometimes in grief, there's also guilt, that, you're like a survivor's guilt in a sense. And so really dealing with that too, and reminding myself that I was here and I deserved joy and I deserved connection still, and I deserved, to live truly. And so self-care really helped me rediscover my identity and my authentic self. And that became a good practice, because even as a busy mom, I still start off my day with me so that I can show up best for myself and them.
And share that a little bit more with me about self-care. So for some people, it's a meditation practice. Other people, it's a yoga practice. What other kinds of self-care do you employ, or do others that you know do?
Yeah, yes, definitely. For me, it has kind of taken different shape and different form depending on, where I am in life. But I am very intentional about waking up early, because that's when, the rest of my family is asleep. And so that allows me, like you were saying, it allows me to set the intention. I always start off my day by setting an intention. I think about what's happening in that day and how I want it to go. And so I think that allows me to set the stage for being more present, with the things that are unfolding in my day, because I've already taken some time to think about them. I do always journal. Setting the intention also kind of goes hand in hand with visualizing a little bit. And then I do take time to meditate. And in my meditation is a big practice of gratitude. I'm very big on gratitude of what has been, what is, and always and also what will be in my life. So, um, yeah, and I found that just by doing that, it really helps ground me, connect me, be more present. After that, usually go on like a walk my dog, something that I'm then, being out in nature. And I love that time every day, because I'm sure, as you know, and many people watching, then your day just gets busy and it's like one thing to the next, and it's hard to like carve out those times. And um, I also build in breath work in there, and that reminds me to take deep breaths throughout the day. And so I think that practice kind of grounds me every day to like go back to it when I need a moment, or I need to breathe, or I need to step away, or I need to remind myself what my intention was. I think it just anchors me.
Yeah, throughout the day. That's interesting. And you did have a self-care practice prior to.
No, prior to my first husband's loss, not at all. No, that definitely came through my own healing journey and in that rediscovering who I was and what I liked. And
Okay.
yeah, so it definitely wasn't there before.
And it's interesting that you really dove in intellectually on the topic to begin to heal and to teach others. And it sounds like you did an amazing job because you really
Oh, yeah,
embraced it. Yeah.
thank you.
And how do you help other people kind of find that authentic self? Um, yeah, because it sounds like you've worked with a lot of people and you've had a very full life, um, of
Yeah,
good and bad. So,
definitely. Yeah, I found that death, if you're or a major loss, if you're open to it, can really be such a gateway to connection. Not only connection with yourself, but connection with those that you love, whether they're here or in another realm. It really opens up those possibilities of what can be. And so I think a loss for many people, major loss is a real low in somebody's life. And so I meet them there because I understand it, like you were saying, both intellectually, professionally, and personally. And so being willing to meet them there and reminding them, like giving them that hope that you're not going to stay there. Just because you're there, you will move through this, you will get through it. And remembering like almost like it's a gray cloud, like it's going to pass and it has something it has gifts along the way if you're willing and open to receive them and kind of go through some of the darkness to get there. And so I think that that really helps. And then it's really great when I start seeing, my clients open up to that possibility and that deeper connection with not only themselves, but with those that they love. And then really things just kind of really unfold from there. And then a big piece that I see as well is being able to integrate that loss. That's such a huge part of feeling whole.
how do you sort of, I don't know how old your daughters are, but how do you give, have them benefit from some of your wisdom? And hopefully they don't have to have tragic experience like you have. But what do you do with them now to?
Yeah, thank you for that question because I think it is so important to share what you can with kids. And so my daughters there's a big gap between them. My older one's 13 and my little one's 5. And so, and I share that because accessing them, looks very different. And so my older one, I've been able to model all those practices, my self care time, my morning time, prioritizing taking care of myself and what that looks like. We all meditate together at night as a family, so they've always had that too. So I think, and gratitude is a huge part of our day to day. Before we eat, we give thanks. We go around, what's something you're thankful for today? And so I think just planting those seeds of gratitude, connecting to yourself. We practice mindfulness throughout the day with my 5-year-old in particular. She has a lot of big emotions. So, allowing her to have those emotions and sitting with them and teaching her that they're not scary from a young age, that it's okay to be angry instead of like getting mad at her for it. And I find her, if she notices that maybe I'm irritated, she'll say, "Oh, mom, it's time for some deep breaths." Sometimes when I hear that, it just makes me laugh, but makes me see that something is sinking in. And,
Yeah,
I think the more they have those practices and see us do it, the more I notice that they model it in different ways, which is
that's fabulous.
it's great to see. It's actually really fun.
I love just the thing, hey, mom, take some deep breaths. But that is really adorable. But that's like such a gift. Um,
I hope so. Like it's fun to watch it unfold, but I hope to see it, unfold more in their life, definitely.
so tell me about, connecting with yourself, and then where do you take that? So you connect with
Mm.
yourself, but just connecting sort of isn't, it seems so grounded. How do you move forward with it, I guess is what.
Like once I'm connecting with myself,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
mean? Well, yeah, sure. And I'll share an example. So, um, when my first husband died, and I've experienced loss since then. So my brother also passed away, which was really difficult. And he was, one of my best friends. And so when my first husband died, David, I didn't realize at the time that I could still have a connection with him. That was something new for me. And so part of the reason why that death felt so big and so overwhelming is because in my mind initially it was over. Like it was
right.
just that relationship was gone. And so through my teaching and through my learning more about death and looking at how different cultures, experience death, I started opening up to the possibility that I could still connect, in meaningful ways. So kind of finding my own ways to honor that relationship and all that it provided for me. And, still maintaining contact with his family, and I just opened up more to the possibility of what that could mean. The same with my brother. And so I no longer see death as um, this complete infinite ending. I find ways to keep the relationship alive, whether that's, in my own meditation, connecting and communicating that way and being open to that, what that could mean. Um, I just find more excitement about possibility, even if I don't know, and even if it's just something that I would desire or want, it makes me feel better. And that for me is good enough. Um, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, go ahead.
No, just the older, I was raised with a religion that I didn't really feel overly connected to, and didn't consider myself very spiritual. But the older I get, the more, I've been fortunate, and I haven't had any big losses earlier. Um, but as you get older, you do experience them, and I'm convinced this is one little blip, along a whole journey, and it's just really interesting that you talk about that, and that relationship, and that you can continue a relationship and have that. And yeah, as long as you don't stay there 24/7, which is not what you're doing at all. So
Definitely. Yeah. And I just think like you're saying, like realizing that, this was one experience and you can continue to have that relationship like you were saying. And it's funny you said like not 24/7, like with my brother, for example, he lived in San Francisco. And so I wouldn't see him all the time, right? He wasn't
right,
a day to day. I live in San Diego. And so, I would call him. I would make time to call him, right? Or to send a package or to do something. And so I think of it like that. It's like you were saying, it's not consuming my whole day, but I
right,
might take 10 minutes to send gratitude towards him for, all the gifts that he did bring to my life. And is, that is enough for me. So something like that, where you can really build it in as that practice, like you would reaching out to loved ones that are here. You can still do it with those that aren't here as well.
yeah. That's actually, I think, really life affirming and generous. I don't, yeah, you've had a lot of loss in your life. I'm like, oh my goodness. And what other kind of losses do you see people facing? Obviously, death of a spouse or a sibling is huge. What other kinds of losses, I guess, are there?
Sure. Yeah, unfortunately, there's many. So obviously, losing a loved one. I've worked with women really painful of lost children, or so anyone in your family, obviously a close friend. But other ways that, I've worked with people is the loss of divorce. There's a lot of loss there. You lose your circle of friends, you lose your identity as well. Often you lose a lot of relationships. So there, it's layered. You even lose somebody that maybe you counted on to take out the trash, like little things that we might take for granted, but they impact your day to day.
Yeah.
I've also worked with women who've had a major health diagnosis that forces them to just change their lifestyle or change their career or the direction that they thought their life was going. They can't maybe participate in things like they wanted to, so that's another kind of loss. A major pattern I see is when you have to kind of redefine who you thought you were in some way. The same with like a major career change or loss that maybe wasn't um, something you would have wanted. And so I think those tend to be the two underliers, something that maybe you didn't want, or necessarily call in intentionally. And one that you really have to relook at, what does this mean? Like, who am I now, kind of, and how am I going to adjust to this? And so those are the main, some of the main
Those are
things.
huge. Yeah. Like it's really major identity. So, transformational.
Yeah.
Um, Life coach is true because we talk about transformations, but those, and it sounds like they're forced upon people
Yep.
usually. It's like people don't choose typically to have that, because nobody goes into a marriage wanting it to end or anything
Exactly.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No one has that intention, right? And then, you know, like you're saying, the transformational piece is realizing that this transformation can really serve for your highest good if you are open to it. And a lot of what I find is that women then from it, have so many gifts to share, to themselves, to their circle of family and friends, beyond that. Sometimes I've seen women tap into their artistic self that they had completely neglected or let go of. And I've seen that in, both visual arts, in writing, or um, in the arts itself. So sometimes it's like a reconnecting to finding this aspect of yourself that was
Mm.
maybe there as you were a child, and you've completely let go of. And so it kind of makes way and makes time for having fun with who can I be, and who can I be, and how did I lose this part of myself along the way, and how did that happen, and being really able to dive into that a little bit.
So you really go back and kind of um, see where the authentic self kind of, I want to say, originated from,
Yeah,
in a way of healing, which I think is, very insightful. Um, wow, wow. And that you're teaching your daughters, um, and your relationships clearly, I'm sure, have been very different from your first husband to your second husband, and you're, I think, married now. So, and and usually when you're like somebody's married so many times, you're like, oh my God, there must be something wrong with them. No, life happens, and um, it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't, what looks like on the surface isn't really what's going on. Um,
definitely. And I'm glad you said that, because to be completely honest and transparent, there was a time that I was like a little like embarrassed about that, like, oh my gosh, and then I just like moved from that to owning it. Like, this is my experience. I
I,
didn't choose this, and I've, made the best of it for sure, and learned so many things along the way. But like you were saying, I think sometimes on the outside, you don't really know. Like, if people didn't know me or didn't know my story, obviously, there could possibly be some judgment or some, preconceived
mhm.
there. And so just to be aware of that too, you don't really know what somebody has gone through, and what their true story really is.
I think that's huge about people in general. And that's what I think this series is about, honoring the authentic self. And, it, don't, the superficial, what it looks like on the surface isn't necessarily, isn't really what's important. It's the deep down connecting and the story and the life events and how your authentic self has starts out and gets shaped along the way, I think.
Yeah, beautifully said, definitely. And I think making space for getting to know people's authentic self, right? And hiding behind those like kind of, you know, false platitudes or hey, how are you type of conversations, and really getting to that place. Obviously not with everybody, but with people that you feel drawn to or connected to or just feel like you want to know more. I'm pretty sure everyone has a beautiful story if we like sit down and take the time to at least learn part of it.
I love that.
Mhm.
This is such a divisive time in the US, especially.
Mhm.
And it's so true. And you can find I do believe connection with people who you think you don't have
Mm,
anything in common with. But if you take the time and you're open to really see who that person is and what their story is, uh,
definitely.
yeah, that is wild. So, do you think your authentic self is different? Well, I guess I'm setting it up this way, not intentionally, when you were sort of young, little, like your 5-year old or even your 13-year-old versus who you were in your later 30s? Uh,
Mm. Yeah, and I think you alluded to this too. I think a lot of what I think your authentic self isn't stagnant, it's dynamic because it moves along with you as you're moving along on this earth plane and having different experiences. And so I think there's maybe like core aspects of your authentic self that stay there and are very present and want to come out. And I would say those aspects of you are there from a time you're young because I see it, what brings like my daughters are very different. And so what brings one joy, to one is completely different than the other one. And so I think they have this inherent pull of what sparks joy for them. And I think over time, often what happens is those things get kind of drowned out by what you should be doing or, where you should be at a certain point in your life. And so I think it's honoring those true aspects of yourself, but then rediscovering other aspects that maybe you didn't tap into when you were little, or
mhm.
kind of presenting themselves in a new way. Um, and so I think it's definitely evolves over time and continues to be dynamic. And I think that that makes it fun because there's parts of you that are there, but then other parts that are kind of unfolding as you go.
Yeah, that are dormant, that get reactivated, that you reconnect with. Yeah. Is there anywhere you kind of start with people that you're seeing? Obviously, we, as coaches and therapists, we try to connect to people and meet them where they're out at. But is there any similarities that you're seeing? Um,
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I do see similarities. I definitely see one in something I think I work on with all my clients is the notion of radical acceptance and just really accepting, um, what has been in your life and how to, and then deciding, well, what does that mean, to really accept this? What's that going to look like for you? Um, and that starts to open the possibility of, and it's not so direct, I would say. I'll use myself. Like, I could have maybe stayed in a place of victim, like, oh, I've had a really hard life. And I have,
yeah.
as many people have, and I've had, so, and I'm sharing that because people can sometimes get stuck in that story. And so, in terms of patterns, is sometimes people might be leaning in that direction of, well, this was terrible and why did it happen to me? And um, really kind of staying tied to that story. Or you can pivot and look at it as something that you can transform into something empowering. Like, yes, it happened to you, but let's see what we can find in it. You know, what meaning does it have? What have you learned? How has it shaped your life from this point forward? And you know, you've talked about other losses, or you were asking me. I've worked with women also who have been survivors of sexual abuse, and that's heavy. You know, that's hard, and that's, I could see how you could fall into like, this was terrible, and it's very hard to like move out of that, or how do you find meaning in that? I mean, that's like horrific and so hard. Um, and so really navigating with how to forgive and make peace and not continue to punish yourself, you know, because staying stuck sometimes in that story is like a re-punishment. And how to really heal that so that you can live a life that is meaningful for you and purposeful, and that you find joy again, and that you're not kind of leaning on coping skills that aren't serving you, you know, in the best and highest way. And so yeah, just really moving through, you know, what you were saying, looking for patterns, is really acknowledging it, accepting it, and then finding ways to reframe it, essentially, so that it serves you instead of keeping you in it and in that
Yeah,
story. Mhm.
yeah, that's because I would see um, where sexual abuse and various types of abuse is so complex, but similar in approach to not staying in it, and that again is a piece that I find so hard in my years is a physician trying to get people out of that and to change their story. Where it sounds easy on the surface but things as profound as you're speaking about, you aren't facing the little ones. You're facing the really, really big um, like life transformation. That's why, I'm loving that you're on this because you're, you know, life has happened to people but you're helping people choose to transform it and not stay there. And that's amazing, and going on with life and living it with joy um, and honoring that their authentic self and the changing nature of it.
Yeah, definitely. And there's more practical tools, you know, like reframing your thoughts, like cognitive behavioral therapy tools, and things that, you know, definitely help along the way. The like, you know, psychological component, there's also definitely a spiritual component. Like, it's very holistic, like it has to be all of you that kind of goes into this this transformation, and really wanting, you know, all of the pieces of you to be along for the ride.
Right. And
Mhm.
then all those pieces hold up the big
Yep.
picture, but you're doing the big picture. So interesting. Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
In addition to seeing people individually, or well, actually, let me ask. A lot of our speakers have, I call them freebies or gifts, and they're actually, things that are pretty profound. So, what are you sharing something with us?
Yes, I'm actually sharing a free 30-minute consult with people. I feel like it's best to just give people one-on-one and get to hear their story, like I was sharing before. I really do love connecting with people one-on-one, and hearing their story, and being able to provide, you know, some resources or feedback that will be helpful along their own journey. So that is what I'm offering today. And I do work with people one-on-one, but like you were saying, um, before, you know, you definitely start to see patterns. And so I am creating a course, you know, going from grief to greatness. And so that's in the works. And I'm really excited about it because it's just going to help me be able to reach more people, essentially, which is really my goal.
Yeah, which I think you do it so beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
So, Dr. Austin, thank you so much for being here. I really, you know, I get different energy with people, and I just love where your energy's at and how you come across. So I really thank you for the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. Likewise, I really value and appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm very grateful that you had me on. So thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Yeah. Bye.